Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending where you're tuning in the world. We are here live on another Facebook Live edition of OnConscious podcast. We're here today with my good friend Reva over in Dubai, as always, and old friend really, Mr. Heath Myers, agent of change, who is joining us also from Melbourne, Australia.
Awesome. It's a pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure and an honor to be here, guys. Thank you for having me on the show.
Our pleasure. And I think we're going to have a cracker of a show tonight. Heath's going to...
I know. Just the term agent of change is enough to got me all, get vibed up and everything. We definitely have to talk about that. Why agent of change?
Yeah, we're going to get into some terminology, that's for sure. I think by way of kicking things off, I'd like to introduce who Heath is, what he does, and why we're super pumped to have him on the show. So Heath is an agent of change. He is also a divine channel. He's a quantum evolution and leadership coach and the founder of Mastery Matrix and the Starseed activations. Heath's mission here in the third dimension world is to help activate our soul's purpose in pursuit of mobilizing service to the world and rapidly accelerating planetary evolution. Heath's journey into spiritual evolution work was catalyzed by a life-changing spiritual awakening, which I'm sure he can give us some more info on. And the result of this saw him start asking questions, which I think is where a lot of spiritual journeys begin, and where they should begin is asking different questions and better questions. And then following this sort of led off to about 20 years, right, Heath, of dedication of learning different tools, learning different healing modalities, shamanic practices, embodiment arts. And now Heath does things like he holds channeled planetary activation ceremonies. Told you there's going to be some cooler terminology coming through in this bio.
Yeah.
We've got some stuff to go through. He also coaches purpose-driven business owners. Heath's a healer and a world bridger. He's a divine channel for various star racers and enlightened masters who joined us just in the green room before we came live. So Heath, wow, welcome to the show. And
it's quite a bit
personally,
of intro, yes.
I cannot wait to unpack that intro and dive into what all that means and how we can activate our soul's purpose. So
yeah. Cool. Well, where would you like to start? I mean, I guess we had some sort of organic thing going when we were in the green room. We were kind of holding ourselves back. Many different directions we could go with this. Where would you like to start?
Well, let's start with your journey. So 20 years ago, who was Heath? What were you up to, and what led to you becoming who and what you are now?
Oh, that's okay. Cool. So, I mean, essentially, ever since I was a young kid, I always had a fascination with the paranormal. I had a fascination with human ability. I just remember it as a kid. Like I was just always watching documentaries and mystery channels and all sorts of stuff like that when I was a kid, and really never had any doubt that human beings were had a greater capacity than what we were told. Right? And it was I don't remember growing up thinking anything different, to be completely honest. So when I was about 20, I started to have some fairly interesting experiences where I had premonitions of things that were going to happen. I'd be walking up the road and I'd have a vision of a friend turning up in their car. And as I walked around the corner, that friend would turn up and get out of their car and wave to me in the exact way that I just had a vision of. And I started to sort of notice patterns of things happening quite regularly, similar to that. And really didn't think anything of it, I just never really spoke to anyone about it. Always had an affiliation with crystals and that kind of thing. And then in my sort of late 20s, started to ask a few questions, but never went really deep, Then I had an awakening experience, and it was on a shamanic medicine around about 20 years ago, where I actually, for all intents and purposes, experienced what I can only explain as death, and went into infinite whiteness, and time didn't exist there, so I can't tell you how long I was there, but I do know that when I came back into this or back into consciousness. And when I came back, I was sitting opposite a whole bunch of multiple-eyed beings, alien-looking dudes who were talking to me telepathically. And they held me in this space of being able to experience a complete egoless state. And in that egolessness, there was like...
How old were you when this happened?
This was in my late 20s, early 30s. So it's probably 28, I reckon. I was about 28, 29. Okay. And and they actually helped me hold this frequency, to hold this particular energy in this state, to have this experience of questions and answers coalescing into one, and having the experience of what I can only term as all-knowingness. Now, when someone says, oh, I've experienced all-knowingness, and you look at that through the lens of ego, it's easy to go, oh, this guy thinks he knows everything. But you can't look at it through the lens of ego. If you take ego out of the equation, knowingness is this beautiful divine state of letting all conditions go completely and having a pure unconditional experience with your creation. These beings turned to me and said this classic question, do you have any questions? And
no, I'm good, thanks. I'm got to get some macas in.
Well, my answer was, there is no questions, there is no answers, it just is. And I am.
Oh. That
was it, boom. And I had the I am frequency experience. And then, so that gave me a lot to integrate. So it took me ages to come back from that as well. Like it was, generally speaking, on that particular medicine that I was on, it's short and brief and intense. But I was actually in this state for probably a good 2 or 3 hours, integrating it physically. Oh, wow. And then what happened was that, in dealing with that at the time, I mean, now there's heaps of people who've had DMT experiences, and there's even sort of networks and groups you can connect with, and people who can specifically help you out with it. 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. So there was no one around me to acknowledge the signs of someone who had actually had a massive awakening, was going through a psychosis episode. And so I took it upon myself to learn about myself, and to learn about the universe, and learn about quantum physics, and to learn about healing and martial arts and psychology and the human condition, to try and put myself back together from this experience. And in the process, I became a practitioner. I reckon it took me a good sort of 7 to 10 years to really integrate the experience, like to truly integrate it, but in that process, became a great practitioner and experienced in neurolinguistics, which is through those studies is where I initially met you, Chris. And then, from there moved into it, the journey opened up into what it has become today, which is like essentially going down a pathway of just following all the doors that the universe has opened to show me how to follow purpose, and how to map being able to follow purpose, and how to live aligned with your soul's highest virtues and skills and traits and gifts that it has to offer the world. So it all started with that awakening and responding to my experience within it.
Would you consider yourself to be one of those indigo children? I mean, what I hear, what you're saying is just phenomenal and mind-blowing, and a lot of viewers that we have today would be thinking the same, because this is not a day-to-day experience. This doesn't happen to anybody. But I've heard there are a few children who are kind of like who come to this earth or come to this dimension possessing this special, unusual, unique supernatural traits or abilities, however we want to say this. So would you consider yourself to be one of these children who have?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's rainbow children and crystal children and indigo children, and there's all these different names that are given to various generations, like Generation X, Y, baby boom, etc., but more from a spiritual perspective that's been labeled upon different generations that are coming through. I don't know a lot about each of the labels for those generations. The work that I do is specifically, for Starseed. So I believe that, I know I'm a Starseed, and that was my activation point. What essentially occurred was that I had an ascension experience, and whilst I could experience that ascended state, I myself was not and may not be yet at the stage of development to hold that state. So I have an ascended state, but I'm not at an ascended stage in this physical incarnation as such. However, starseeds. So starseeds are essentially old souls who've originated from other star systems, lived on higher dimensional planes, in many cases have lived lifetimes as angelics, have lived lifetimes as elementals, have lived on some of the classic star races that you hear a lot in conversations, in metaphysical conversations these days about Pleiadians and Arcturians and Sirians and Orions and Lyrans and this kind of thing. The starseeds have originated in these star races and have incarnated over and over and over, in some cases hundreds of thousands of times. My soul tells me that I've been here more than 600. I have incarnated more than 600.
Wow.
And I'm not one of the old, without a doubt. Like, it's, you know, I'm throwing around some figures here, folks, but honestly, they're just numbers, because there's older than that, you know. And we're all eternal beings, you know. And some of us are actually old souls who've done it a lot and have lived on higher dimensional planes, and some of us are young souls who haven't done it a lot and have only incarnated through third dimensional realities. So starseeds essentially incarnate into and have incarnated into the Earth plane specifically with a mission to assist in the raising of planetary consciousness at this point in time. And so it's kind of like it's coded into our timeline that to wake up at a certain point or to activate at a certain point. And for those of us like myself who were kind of like, you know, in retrospect, resisting it, it's almost like the universe went, wake up, you know. So
that's already predetermined, that it's coded, you're saying, in your timeline when you're...
Yeah, as I understand it, we have as starseeds, we have like a soul contract to have this awareness of our infinite nature activated at a certain time in order for us to be able to utilize that to fulfill our specific mission here on Earth. So, and you know, it sounds totally out there, right? You know, it sounds totally out there. And for me, I resisted this for years and years and years. Like, that awakening experience was 20 years ago. I literally came out and was honest about being a channel in the world and channeling, you know, enlightened masters and star races. It's probably been 14 months since I've come out and been really honest about it, because it is so freaking out there. But everything I learn about it and everything that I study resonates. And what's more is it aligns with the experiences that I've had, where I have incredible remembrance of things like languages that I've never, ever learned before. Remembrance of full entire martial arts systems that I've never, ever learned before. Meditation techniques that I've never studied before. Healing techniques that I've never studied before. It's a long list of things that I wake up to on a regular basis and have done since that awakening experience that shows me that everything I read about this prophecy of starseeds actually coming through and awakening to these, what you would probably call supernatural traits, is true. And the more I work with people, the more I see it on a day-to-day basis. And even as I'm saying this right now, I bet you there's so many listeners out there who are going, holy fuck, I experienced that goes on for me.
Yeah, I think that's the slightly mind-blowing. I mean, this is something that is not terribly unfamiliar to Reva and I. As saying, this podcast is effectively Reva and I's WhatsApp chats, and this is the kind of shit that we get into and just kind of try and freak each other out about. Hey, did you read this? Have you seen this? Have you heard about the seventh dimension? Have you heard about?
It's funny, isn't it, Chris? Because even when we are having these WhatsApp conversations, the number of times I've actually asked you, are we crazy? Are we weird? Like, why are we talking about this shit? Are there people
I think
like
that's
us?
I think you're a starseed.
I mean,
But
you look at...
that's Christopher, who has just put up his comment right now, watching the stream. I can so relate to everything you are saying right now. So, hi, Christopher.
Yeah, I think as I was sort of saying, you look at some of the famous ones in like Abraham, who was channeled through Esther Hicks. There's a massive body of work there. Conversations with Gods with Neil Donald Walsh, who clearly channeled God or channeled a similar source.
Yeah.
Irrespective of how they came to the information, basing it on the information and the practical application of it, as you were saying, it took you a while to go, this all feels a bit weird, but when you tested it in this three-dimensional reality that we live in, you went, okay. You know.
And I was really happy to, many of the experiences that I just spoke about actually happened to me before I read about it, you know, and that was for me was like, when I was reading it, I'd be like, holy shit, that's happened to me. Holy shit, I do that. Yeah, I've got that. Yeah. You know, it started to add up that way, you know. And yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of, I think for many of us, you know, the deep question, you know, who am I? Where do I come from? You know,
why am I here?
Why am I here? Right?
What's my purpose? Yeah.
What is my purpose? That's right. What am I doing here? You know, I just believe that if you ask those questions enough, and you ask them deeply enough, like sincerely enough, and you ask them often enough, I believe that your creation starts to respond and starts to open doorways to show you answers to who and what you are, what you already are in truth. You know, and so, you know, I think that's kind of how it happened for me. The experiences, I asked a lot of the questions, the experiences came, and I also am quite a willful critter as well. Along the way, I'm pretty sure I probably sat there in meditation and said, "Give it to me."
Yeah.
And so here it is, you know. But yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, the Starseed story really adds up for me. It really adds up.
So we've got a question now from Sarah. Actually, Chris, Sarah's asked a couple of questions, hasn't she? So one of it was, how do you remember past lives? And she's also asked, is DMT needed to experience the all knowledge?
Yeah, great, awesome, excellent. So the first question is, how do you remember these past lives? Well, firstly, I don't have strong memories of specific memories of past lives. What I do is I have memories of, I have internal realization of things that I haven't learnt before. So imagine all of a sudden knowing a language and you've never studied it. Imagine knowing a martial art, you've never studied it. Imagine all of a sudden knowing a healing system and you've never studied it, and you can't find any record of it existing anywhere else. That is the process of remembrance. That's what remembrance feels like. When you remember how to ride a bike, if you haven't ridden a bike for years and you get on a bike and you put your feet on it, how does the memory come? You don't sit there and go, oh, now what did I do last time? You just hop on it, and next thing you know, you're doing it. It's like the moment provides itself. The bike is there. I remember how to ride. So what I teach in people in the process of going through their evolution, and what I utilize myself, is I create containers, what I call consciousness containers, that I can step into that call forward these, what I would refer to as soul mastered characteristics and traits. When I open that field, I can step into it and bang, it comes through. When I'm not in that field, when I'm not in that situation, it doesn't come through. You know, like, so does that answer your question on the, hopefully that answers your question on the remembering of past lives. I mean, I'm not a past life specialist. I believe that what I am is an evolution and activation specialist. And so for me, you know, it's like, boom, you just know. How do you know? How do you know anything? You know, you know. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question. Is DMT needed to experience the all knowledge? I don't believe that you need any drugs or medicines of any specific quality or variety to experience any one thing. I believe that they show us where to go, but they are not how you get there. So funnily enough, I know a lot of people who've chased the dragon a lot on DMT, and to be quite honest, since that experience, I've probably had it like 3 times, and each time nowhere near was not interested in having a breakthrough dose at all. That was my breakthrough. I had it. I don't need to chase that dragon again. And I do have memories of that all-knowingness in meditative states without using any substances whatsoever. So no, you don't need to.
Yeah, DMT is an interesting one, isn't it? It's quite linked to the pineal gland, right? So it does occur naturally within the pineal gland, which is a little rice-sized disc kind of in the base of your skull kind of area, which if you, depending what sources you go by, the pineal gland used to be connected through the third eye, metaphysically, but also physically, depending on the sources you go back and look at. So it was something that was perhaps more prominent during human evolution, in this dimension or across other dimensions. So it is a naturally occurring neurochemical or biological chemical within the body. So that's a whole other fascinating sort of arc of discovery on that aspect. But it's interesting that do you find that people that do become activated through things like ayahuasca medicine, DMT, or does it also come through trauma and that kind of situation as well?
Interesting. So it's kind of like, it's similar to that sort of conversation that, around flow states, where sometimes, there's different ways that you can generate a flow state. One particular way that you can generate a flow state, which is just basically, generating circumstances that trigger a particular biochemical response within your body that creates a certain state that enables you to be a certain way to enact a particular action, right? To make something happen, or to generate a particular experience. So it's similar, flow states can actually be generated through pressure, through being under pressure. That is one way, but it's not the way, and I think it's kind of like, activation can happen in all sorts of ways as well. Like the circumstance can emerge that requires you to access that particular soul mastered characteristics. I think it's really important to understand that we're moving into a quantum conversation here, right? And when you move into a quantum conversation, linear time becomes, to a certain extent, obsolete. It's essentially just a calibration or a measurement that you use to discuss something, right? Because these past lives are not past lives from a quantum perspective. They may be in a linear form previous to this moment now on a timeline. However, we're talking about the quantum nature of things, which means the time collapses completely and everything is now.
Yes.
Right? Past, present, future self, now.
They're all happening parallelly, yes.
All the way back to all your soul, into your higher soul family, right the way to your 12th dimensional self, and all the way back to the source being that you are in truth. All here now. Right? So it's not remembering past lives.
It's now, yeah.
Remembering the truth of now. Wow. And what's happening is that certain circumstances occur that draw out these particular traits. So I'm aware of soul mastered characteristics that I have. I'm aware of having soul mastered healing, being a shaman, and being a warrior. Okay. So, when I jump into, like, I just recently created Starseed activations, ran my first live event in January. It was like the response was phenomenal. And it was the biggest presentation speaking gig I've ever done in my life. Right. And what happened was that I was consciously creating it as a consciousness container. And the moment that we started it, we switched on the camera, I turned on the show and went for it live. I felt my soul master characteristics of the speaker and of the shaman come through immediately. Like, I knew what to do. I knew what to say. It was like I wasn't in my body anymore. It was like something else came through that felt more genuine than my sense of self. And I just presented and facilitated, and a few hours passed, and next thing I knew, it was done, and this thing had just happened. So what I like to tell people is that it's the circumstance that draws it out of you. So once you have an awareness of what your soul master characteristics are, you need to create circumstances that will draw that out of you, like a vacuum. You step into that container, and you've done it consciously, created this quantum container that says, in here, something more needs to come through for me. And it does. And this is very similar to what surfers might talk about in flow states, or martial artists talk about in flow states. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
That
You got
makes
some
sense.
questions, Riva?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I've got tons of questions. Like this is mind blowing for me, right? Okay, first of all, I would like to start with what you were mentioning, the introduction. You were saying you were avoiding it for very long, and then one fine day, the universe said, "Boom! Listen, now this is your time. You got to listen." What was it? How do you know you were avoiding it? What did you mean by avoiding it?
Yeah, sure. So I went and studied life coaching, and this is how Chris and I met. We met through similar programs. I went and studied life coaching, neurolinguistics, hypnotherapy, studied that through to master's level. The whole time I was studying it, I could see what a great tool this was for being able to make a bridge between the personal development world and the spiritual development world, right? And so I started to see and understand myself as a world bridger, you know. However, I wasn't outright about telling people about these experiences that I was having of healing modalities and martial arts forms and languages that I'd never learned. What I would do is I would market it in a mainstream way. And if it was kind of a bit like a mullet, you know, all business at the front, party at the back, right? So it'd be all business at the front, but if someone came through and they were quite awake, then they would get the advanced evolution version of Heath. Then I became good at being a world bridger. I ended up moving into becoming a consultant for major financial institutions, taking senior leaders, super senior leaders, like people really quite high up in financial industry, through 12-week programs of becoming more emotionally intelligent, becoming more connected with their sense of self, their personal brand, and their purpose in the business, you know. And you know, I would turn up, and before I go into a room, I'd be working with my channel and doing clearing work on myself, then walk into a room and, you know, just toe the line and be another corporate facilitator. For ages, I was working undercover, and I wasn't being outright in how I discussed what it was that I did, you know. And so I moved into doing embodiment art programs. I ran a program called Inner Essence for 4 years. In that, I felt safe to start opening to channel, and that's where my light language started to come through, and that's where I started to have a full remembrance process over those 4 years of a whole bunch of embodiment arts and meditation arts that, again, were inherent in my body, waiting to experience them and remember them. But I still didn't talk about it openly. It was like people were there going, "What's this thing that Heath's doing? He must be a channel. I don't know." I never really spoke about it, you know. So I still do the leadership facilitation work. I've been at it for 8 years now. I'm now a senior associate consultant, and you know, I've been working still with the same financial institutions. They love me. They keep getting me back. And what my fear was that if I came out about who I was and what I was in truth, that, you know, these safety nets that I had up, which were generalist coaching, which was being a leadership facilitator, would disappear, and then all of a sudden I wouldn't have the safety and the security and the stability that I needed to run my business and fulfill my mission. I've been aware of my life purpose since 2010. You know, I sat down one day and I asked a question of the universe. I said, "Why am I here? Like, what's my purpose? Let's have it now. Come on." And a big resonant voice in my head said, "You are here to awaken divine presence in humanity." I went, "Okay, cool."
So what made you ask that question? Was it a particular trauma, or was it an incident? What made you ask you that question?
I just wanted to know. I just wanted to know why I was here. I was having all these awakening experiences, and I just really wanted to know what I was supposed to do with it all. And so I asked that question over and over for about 90 days. Asked the same question. And eventually I got this answer that said, "Look, you know the answer. You're just not stepping into it. You need to step into your purpose. You need to own it. You need to embody that everywhere you go. And the moment I did that, so many doors opened, including this particular leadership gig. So I followed all of that, but I still couldn't come out and be honest with about who what I am. I was a purpose coach for 3 years, assisting businesses to get really clear on who they are, what they do, their niche, their brand message, how they can use that in social media, all these kind of things. And at the same time, I still wasn't getting the kick out of my business that I wanted to. I wasn't walking my own talk, and I'm going to totally own that. It was about 18 months ago that, I started to go into, I started having symptoms of adrenal fatigue. I started to have symptoms of overworking and hustling, and was in anxiety and all sorts of struggle. At the same time, I was helping people and getting fantastic results with my clients. I was fucking falling apart. And I actually scaled my business back, pulled it all apart, got it down to the simple thing of what do I do with people, and just went back into one-on-one. And that's when my channel opened, and it was just obvious. It was like, hey, for fuck's sake, man, just own it. You are a channel. You are a channel for a whole bunch of different extraterrestrial, higher dimensional races. Channel angelics, you can channel elementals, you can channel ascended masters. You can pretty much channel anything you put your mind and your channel to. Own it. Own your story. Get out there and tell the world who you are in truth, and start walking that path. And so I did about 18 months ago, and really, really amped it up about 12 months ago. And since then, what's starting to come through in the body of work that I'm presenting to the world, it feels like, even though I've been on a 20-year career, my guides keep telling me, no, man, it only just started, and the reason I'm sharing that, is that I think there's a lot of people out there who feel that they can't bridge this, this supernatural or this starseed self into the real world. And, the funny thing is that, so I cut off all my generalist life coaching funnels, and all of a sudden all my other funnels went boom, exploded. And all of a sudden all these leadership programs wanted more of me, and were paying me more, and were giving me better opportunities. And it was like the universe was like, see, all you have to do is just be yourself, And I think there's a little bit of a, that's kind of like a staff I like to hold for my clients and for the people that work with me, is that, I will stand in the reality of your dreams, and I'll hold you accountable to being your best self, because I spent years having all of this amazing stuff going on for me in the background, but I wasn't using it in the foreground. It was because I was afraid of what people would think, what my parents would say, and how the world would judge me. And I had to step through that. And, I'll happily step out into the world now. I call it coming out process, owning myself as a channel. And if people want to think I'm crazy or have abusive things to say to me, blessings on your path, this is me, this is who I am, and I'm on a mission to shift the earth. And if I can't step into my power and own who I am in truth, how can I possibly assist the planet at this time of need?
And Chris, do you have a question? Do you want to say something? Because I'm going to keep going.
Hand the floor to you. You've got I can feel you bubbling away over there. So have at it.
No, well, of course, the next question I wanted to ask is really about not just finding your purpose, but is there a way to guide people to find their purpose if these situations do not seem to be able to rise in their life? So isn't that what you do, Heath?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, well, there is ways and means that you can go about it. Like, so over years of doing limitless coaching and having to develop systems that were based on measurable, repeated testing, right? What emerged was I started to notice that there is actually ways, the systems and models that you can use to assist people with this. So if you look at it from this perspective, all of us we have things that we like to do that are important to us. We have ways that we like to be that are important to us. And we have specific strengths that we have to share with the world, right? These things that we love to do and these things how we love to be and the things that we have are all indicators of what we are already. right? Not what we're trying to become, but who and what we are already. So I've developed a process which is called the Impact Compass, where I take people through a whole bunch of measurable behavioral assessments, from strength finders through to values discovery methods, through to purpose profilers, through to using MBTI personality indexes, and running that through something which I call the Impactful Life Model, where we actually can figure out someone's unique formula for fulfillment, or their unique formula for meaning, or their unique formula for a sense of purpose. When you add all those things together, it points to what I call your key area of impact, which is like a compass, right? And once you know that and you can own that as a statement, then you can actually just apply that to your life and your business and say, well, is it in the direction of my compass? No? Well, then it's not for me. It's not an opportunity, you know? So, and then what that does is that opens up a very interesting conversation around mission, around vision, around soul values. And when you put all of that together, what you're starting to have is a conversation that brings someone's purpose to the surface. You know, purpose is not a destination; it's a pathway. So if someone tells you where it's all going, that's not purpose. You have to figure it out for yourself. But process like the Impact Compass enables you to have a very clear, concrete statement, and that gives you something to follow where you can start refining your sense of purpose and what that is and getting it into words. And ultimately for everybody, it's very simple. It's generally about 6 or 7 word statement. Bam, this is my purpose, this is me, this is who I am.
Wow. Okay. So this is going over and above values, vision, mission, the sort of standard stuff that we look at. We sort of pre-show we talked about. Now on this show we talk about helping people become more conscious, make more conscious decision. You're talking more on a super conscious and above sort of level, that this it's more of connecting to a higher self. Is that somewhat where this is coming from?
Yeah. So it's actually super practical. Like, you know, it's the answer as to who you are and why you're here is in everything you do. It's not something separate to self. It's not something that exists on another dimension. It's evidently something that originates from somewhere higher, but it is here now, and you have always been on it. The thing that happens whenever I sit there with someone, because when this conversation around purpose opens up, often I will get channel where I can just get a very clear, bam, your purpose is this. And when I know when it's coming, and I deliver it, and people can cry sometimes when they hear it because it resonates so deep within themselves. The moment that someone gets their purpose or they get their key area of impact, you can look through your life and just see this straight line through everything that's like, of course. And you realize that it was always there. And it was always there in your values. It was always there in your ideals. It was always there in your traits and skills and strengths. You know, the healer in me isn't something that was reserved for when I reached my middle age. As I search back, I was the guy at school that when a kid had been going through cancer treatment, that I would hang next to him and defend him from the kids that were picking on him because he'd lost all his hair. Like, do you see what I mean? It was always there in me. It's not like I had to bring it in from somewhere to get it. The process of understanding your purpose isn't bringing it in from somewhere. It's looking into the practicalities and the grounded aspect of your everyday life and seeing the emergent pattern and then just following that pattern. And the moment you follow that pattern, it magnetizes opportunity and synchronicity and flow into your life like you wouldn't believe, because you're now following the thread. Ultimately, we all have a destiny. I believe that we all come in here awake and totally, wholly, completely carrying all of the consciousness coding necessary to fulfill something that our soul came here to do. But we come into a consciousness that is unwell. Like, we all know this. You don't need to be Einstein or Uri Geller to figure this stuff out, right? We come into a consciousness that's unwell. And in that process, what happens is that we get coded with things like subordination to other people's values. We get distracted. We through fear of what others will say, we start denying to ourselves who and what we are in truth. And we recode ourselves away from this divine coding or this source coding, this destiny coding that we come through with. And then the process of awakening that some of us choose to embody and others don't, and that's totally cool. But that process of awakening is then deconditioning out all of that coding and allowing yourself to discover that essence, that inner essence of who and what you are, and then making the following of that a practice, you know?
Yeah.
And that belief, it's always there. We're not bringing it in from somewhere else. It was there. It was part of our pure blueprint when we came through as awakened, realized beings, each and every one of us.
Yeah, I think a number of things that you have said over here, very, very important points, that just being conscious of what are the recurring patterns in your life, and then you understand that, and then choose that path, go, and then you can't get wrong, because everything then surrounding you just happens to make that happen. And also that reminds me of what Dr. Joe Dispenza always says, is it's all about the wiring and the rewiring that's supposed to happen. So you're supposed to, shed away these things that you kind of acquired from the community, from your parents, or from the society that you have learned that might not ideally be apt for your life. I've got one question, and this one actually comes from one of your recent blog posts. It's about the current situation that's happening right now. And yes, these are challenging times, these are testing times, and the external world has a heightened perception of limitation right now. How do you work around this? How do you work around this limitation?
Yeah, interesting. It was a conversation I had with my wife recently, or my ex-wife recently, I should say, was exactly that. We were talking about the current situation on the planet. We were talking about what it means to our family, and we were talking about how you create in the midst of all of this. And my response was, you pick a vector and go for it. It's like, where do you want to be on the other side of this? I'm actually going to hold a Facebook Live about this next week, where there's these 3 components that I think are necessary to navigate this period of time. I don't want to call it uncertain times anymore. I want to call it just, it's a shift of ages. We're going through a shift, right? Mm-hmm. So how do we navigate this shift? Well, there's 3 things that I think we need to keep an eye on. One, we need to have an idea of what our vision is. So very simply put, where the hell do you want to be on the other side of this? Because there will be another side. Where do you want to be? What do you want your life to look like? What do you want to be doing? How do you want to be being? What do you want to be having? Yeah. How do you want to be positioned in your life, in your business? And given the fact that we're going through change, if you're here to serve humanity, what's the greatest service that you have that you can lend on the other side of this? So get really clear on your vision, right? And then I think the next thing is you need to come back to now and say to yourself, well, how do I need to be? And the key word is be. How do I need to be now in order to have this vision come true? And that's your vibe, that's your vibration, that's your mood, your attitude, your energy, your vitality. Like, how do you need to, what if that vision, when you drop into it, how does that feel? What does it look like? How do you look? What are you doing? How are you being? Bring that into this current moment right now. And your job is to do that now, is to be as if that vision is true, and make that your daily practice. And the next thing you need to have is you need to have volition. In other words, you need to have the will. You need to take action. Right now, it's far too easy to use the current circumstances as a crappy excuse to play small. So many people are doing it. It is the reason why, if there's any crumbling of financial systems, and if there's any demise in small business and creativity, it exists in that very simple attitude that says, oh, well, there's something bad happening, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wait until it all blows over and we'll see what happens. That the people who do that on the other side of this are going to be the ones who will need the help, not the ones who will be helping. Right now, we all need to show a great deal of volition and courage and will, and take action based on the vision that we want and who we are in this present moment now. And if you can pick that vector and you can stay on that vector, then I believe that what we're going through is actually an expansion portal. It is a growth opportunity like nothing ever before. And those who take advantage of it will be setting themselves up very well for, say, 6 to 12 months from now. Does that answer?
And that's actually your question, isn't it, McLean? I think one of the most important things. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place now because I'm so excited. I need to calm down. I've had way too much coffee, I think. Okay, let me just ask this. Like vibing so high.
Your grounding activation,
Quite a number of people have actually said that 2020 is probably the time a major shift was anyway supposed to take place. I mean, unprecedented times and challenges and everything, yes, but we are seeing a number of people getting actually conscious, reading about these stuff, listening to podcasts. We're seeing a lot of transformational life coaches, people like yourself who just want to, and it's not just about people like yourself wanting to guide people to the right path, but people in general public becoming so accepting of these things. I mean, these conversations would be so taboo about 10-20 years ago. It'll be like, what the hell are these people talking about? But right now people are so interested and engaged. What do you really think? Is this the time? Is 2020, has it got something to do with the year?
Well, yeah. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess, what's the honest answer on that? If it all happens this year, then yes, this was the year. I think that, it's, I don't want to look at it from a fatalistic perspective. What I want to look at it from is a realistic now perspective. Right now, whether we agree with the enforcements in place and what's happening in the world, right now, what we're being, like, the universe is putting us in introspection. Everything is an expression of the universe, right? So the universe right now has us in this spot where we're going into introspection. We're getting clear and honest with ourselves about what's important to ourselves. We're not distracted so much by the outside world. We're not using social engagement as a means of distracting ourselves away from discomfort. We are, and probably to a certain extent, engaging in less substances and partying and these kind of things as well. People are getting clear with themselves about what's important. They're putting their shit aside. They're connecting with their heart and they're connecting with truth. And when en masse, a whole population of billions of people connect with their heart and with honesty and truth and get clear about what they want, then what happens is the collective field of consciousness responds. And I believe that's what's going on now. And I believe that's the reason why my parents, who are nearly 80, are calling me up and saying, I'm pretty sure there's something else going on here. Because it's like, well, we're all, the collective climate, the collective consciousness, the climate of the collective consciousness is at an expanded and higher vibrational state. So it stands to reason that people are going to start to just start asking questions because they're now looking at the world through a different lens.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool perspective, and that idea of collective consciousness, that's what got us here. If you know, this situation has been brought about by the collective consciousness. So the way out of it is to shift that collective consciousness to something to move, I guess, in the most basic terms, fear got us here and love's going to get us out. And you see a lot of spiritual teachers and a lot of people that, as Reva was mentioning, that are looking for these awakening. They're talking about this as a period of awakening and moving into more of that sort of love.
Yeah, like hashtag woke is actually a thing, woke.
Yeah. Woke, yeah, it is. It's been a thing for a little while. An interesting thing. I don't know much about the terminology of it, but it's discussing essentially people who are awakened. But it sort of like raises the question: well, what is awakening? Like, for me, awakening is let's unload it, right? Because it can feel a little bit when we start talking about consciousness and how many lifetimes you've had and awake and asleep. It sounds like spiritual materialism and almost like the spiritual Olympics, right? And it's not the case. It's kind of like these are things that you can actually quantify to a certain extent. So what is awake? Well, the way I look at it is that we're born awake, and the system that we're born into and the collective consciousness that we're born into puts us into a sleep pretty rapidly. Then we forget that we have a higher potential than what the world tells us. And then one day we become aware of the fact that we do have a higher potential. Like I remember when I had that experience myself, I was on a bus and I started crying as I was looking out over this sunset on my way home from school, because I was realizing on a visceral level that I could achieve more in life than I had been told, you know. And so that's awareness, you know. And awake, I believe, is when you have a spontaneous experience of a higher potential or a higher awareness, right? That once you've had that experience, you can't go back from it. That's the difference between being aware and being awake. Awake means, oh shit, I've seen something or I know something, and nothing will ever be the same ever again. And the thing is that a lot of people go, oh, great. And it's especially, you know, not that I work too predominantly with the New Age community. I work predominantly more so with you know, grounded spiritual people who are working in business and in purposeful service. But there is, you know, especially in New Age communities, there's this kind of concept a lot of the time of people like they have their awakening experience and then they think they're awake. But awakening is just the beginning, you know. That's actually just the beginning. Like, you know, when I got my black belt, I remember my sensei handing it to me and going, "You're ready now." You know, not like you're there. Yeah. You're ready. And I believe awake means you're ready. And I think that's maybe that's when we talk about this awakening that's taking place, is that maybe what's about to happen is not this, oh, wow, impactful, you know, we're there, but actually the first step, which is, hey, you know what? We're asking questions and things have got to change and we're ready. We're ready to take the next step. And I think that's the awakening that's taking place now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that we're, you know, that idea that we're at the start line now, or we're potentially at the start line now. We get to choose what's about to come. We've sort of seen we've seen what the result of the last, let's say we've seen the results of the Industrial Revolution. We've seen the results of the last 2,000 years of belief systems. This right now is where that's got us.
Yeah.
What do we choose to create next? What's better than this? Where do we want to take this thing that is different to where we're at now? I think that conscious creation of that reality is going to be pretty amazing once you get a whole lot of people that start to think that way and start to, in your terminology, kind of start to activate their higher self and activate their true purpose and become speakers, become motivators, become inspirers, and set up a better world for the next generation.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that everybody needs to become a thought leader. I think what it actually means is that people just need to realize that inherently you are a leader. We're all leading each other. We're all leaders. It's just that the more we shy away from it through shame or disbelief or not good enough or unworthiness or whatever, or just that how could I ever be that person? The more we shy away from that, the more we actually fall back into being a world of followers. And that's actually what we're trying to break free from. We promised we wouldn't have conspiracy conversations, so this is as far as I'll go with it. But I do believe that what we are breaking here is a slave consciousness that has just rolled on from history into now, and we're still trying to emerge from it, you know. And what's probably a little bit more dangerous about the slave consciousness of today as it was to, say, thousands of years ago is at least thousands of years ago, you knew you were a slave. Whereas today, a lot of us actually don't realize that we're engaging consciously and, well, unconsciously in a system in a system that is infused with the systemic culture of slavery. And that's what we're breaking free from. So yes, we do need to all understand that we're leaders, and we need to stop having shame about that. And we need to, you know, take responsibility and step into our sovereignty and understand that, you know, nothing stands between us and source. And if we're not happy with the way things are, then we have to get the fuck up and do something about it. You know, it's a crisis of consciousness that we're going through now. And the only way through is by each individual recognizing and realizing that each and every one of us is the one we've been waiting for. And when we do that, that's when this shift will move from being an awakening into an alignment, into an activation, into an amplification of our true selves, so that we can have that impact of shifting consciousness, which I believe is actually totally possible in this timeline, in this lifetime of ours. But we have, yeah.
Yeah.
Did it drop?
Yeah, wow.
Totally possible. You know, each and every one of us at some point has had a breakthrough. It came from a breakdown, and then we had a breakthrough, and it was like life was like this, and then 5 minutes later it was like that. And so we've seen it all possible on an individual level. It's possible on a group level. But I tell you what, if we fall back as a race into apathy after everything that's gone on now, we will have missed an epic opportunity. An epic opportunity, you know. And each and every one of you, every single one of you right now listening, it's all up to you. Every single one of us, you are the one we've been waiting for. And it's time for us to own it with healthy pride as well. Step through that shame that holds us back from owning that and fucking doing what we came here to do. I get passionate about it. Sorry.
Love it. No, I wish we had another hour to keep going. It's yeah, the way that you put that just then sort of brought everything. I'm sure there's a lot of people that might have been watching this that might have switched off, going, "Oh, this is a whole bunch of esoteric bullshit. This guy's channeling whatever." How you just put that was probably the most practical way that you can talk about how we as a race need to get out of this situation and consciously create something better. So people want to do that, Heath. How do they find you? We know you've got a program out called Align with Destiny. Tell us a bit about that and how you can help people that are interested in doing this type of work with themselves.
Yeah. So what I do is I call what I do quantum evolution and leadership coaching, right? And so the work that I do is I create sacred containers for light workers and starseeds, who are, because I believe that the light workers and the starseeds, the next realm of enlightened masters to come through, are not necessarily walking the planet and serving and like they did back in the old days, thousands of years ago. What they're doing is, I actually think they're in entrepreneurial business these days. So the work that I do is it tips its hat to the concept that your business is actually your spiritual evolution generator. And so it's, you know, the people that I work with are spiritually aligned entrepreneurs and change makers in the world who really believe that their service, no matter what it is, whether they're thought leaders or not, their service is what the world needs. It's the medicine that the world needs, and it's their expression for their soul mastery characteristics. And they're the people that I work with. The work that I do is about aligning people with their soul, activating their dormant powers, and assisting them to amplify their leadership in the world. So I'm creating quarterly programs that will eventually stitch into a 12-month program. But the first quarterly program I've designed is called Align with Destiny, which is all about activating and aligning with your soul's highest timeline of limitless potential and purposeful service. So this is for impact-driven business people and leaders who want to become a vibrational match for that vision that I talked about earlier, and are ready to start learning about becoming channels, ready to start learning about how to create and connect in with spiritual guidance teams, learning to develop a really strong relationship and connection with their soul, and ready to activate their soul destiny codes, the source codes that they came to anchor for humanity, and learn practices and processes that they can engage in on a daily basis to raise their vibration to become a match for their soul mastery characteristics, so that they can apply that in business and start to change the world through their service and their business to the world. So it's kicking off on June 21st. So I'm kicking it off on the winter solstice. It's going to go for 12 weeks. It'll be online, obviously, because we're not having mass gatherings at the moment. And so if people are interested in it, there's the link is on the it's just at the bottom of the screen there, or you can go to heathmyers.com. Or alternatively, if you want to be part of a free group that I work in and meet me there and hang out there for a little bit, come to Vibe Time. Look up Vibe Time with Heath Myers And that's another way that we can work together as well. But yeah, Align with Destiny kicking off in June.
Awesome. And we'll put all the links to all of Heath's stuff, including the new Align with Destiny program, all of your socials, every way people can get in touch with you. We'll drop that in the show notes, which will be up on the website. And we'll accompany this as it goes out across the multiverse of the podcast universe.
Yeah.
We've just cracked an hour.
Oh, we did. Awesome.
Yeah. It always flies by. It's never long enough. We need to start doing a 2-hour podcast, I think, Reva.
Yeah, I know. And I took a lot of time asking so many. I mean, I think post this, we will continue the conversation in the green room, Heath. I'm not going to let you go that easily. But it's just been an amazing 1 hour already, and there's just so much to talk about, because we're not just talking about this dimension, are we? I mean, it's just not about the 3D world anymore. It's just beyond that. It's stuff that's happening across times, across dimension, but time is really, it's pretty relative at this point. But thank you so much for joining us today. It was phenomenal hour.
Yeah, it was an incredible time.
Beautiful to hang out with you guys, really, and really enjoyed establishing a connection. I feel like the beginnings of a friendship that's been brewing for a little while.